This has been an extraordinary year filled with too many stresses to count. It's important to your health and to those around you to check in with yourself and others to make sure everyone is okay. This holiday season can be especially stressful, but remember that you don't have to go through any of this alone. There are folks who support you and want to see you okay so that we all come out on the other side of this together. Don't forget that, and don't be afraid to speak up if you need a hand. This is Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. And we're just a day or so away from kicking our 2020 calendars into the recycling bin and hanging up our 2021 versions, full of blank pages and a lot of hope. Not much is going to change come January 1. We're still amid a pandemic. Many of our family and friends are hurting emotionally, financially, and maybe physically. But there's hope on the horizon, and maybe your resolutions this year have to do with the spiritual or aspirational to help us all get to spring and better times. I've been thinking a lot about pints, and specifically what I missed as I spent time at home this year away from normal beer-related things. And I've really missed draft beer. I've missed settling into favorite tables or stools at familiar bars, scanning a list and ordering something new and exciting or flavorful or just reliable. And over the course of this year, I've talked with a lot of brewery owners and brewers about how COVID-19 has impacted them and changed the brewing industry. But today, I wanted to talk about bars and what the pandemic has meant to them. As I got to writing this introduction, there's this article in the Wall Street Journal that chronicled the plight of bars and restaurants across the country amid restrictions and shutdowns. And there's one quote in particular that stuck out to me. It's from Aaron Gregory Smith. He's the executive director of the United States Bartenders Guild. And he said, quote, "This is the worst crisis to hit the industry since Prohibition." Like you, I miss travel and I miss going to bars that feel familiar, even if I only visit once or twice a year or every few years. A good feeling and a well-appointed bar is an extension of the publican. And today on the show, I'm honored to be joined by three of the very best in the country. Polly Watts of the Avenue Pub in New Orleans, Michael Roper of Hop Leaf in Chicago, and Chris Black of Falling Rock Tap House in Denver. All three are thoughtful, passionate, and knowledgeable, and each have been kicked while down this year, but are doing their best to stick it out. We spoke shortly before Christmas, with Chris in Denver, Michael in Chicago, and Polly in London, where she's visiting her daughter. And I had some questions in mind before we started, but quickly realized that since all three were friends and had a lot on their minds, so I just hit record and let them at it. This is a longer show than usual, but I hope you find it as interesting and as engaging as I did listening to these three. Polly starts off by talking about being overseas and the current state of her bar. Here's their conversation.
This is the first year since my dad passed away that I've actually left during December, because usually that's a time where I don't take off because we're busy enough that I need to be there, and I want to give my staff that wants off. So this is the first year in an odd way, the pandemic has actually allowed me to do something that I would not have normally done.
That's interesting, Michael or Chris. Have there been anything similar to what Polly just said that could almost be seen as a silver lining?
Well, I've spent even more time with my wife than normal, which is kind of a plus.
Yeah.
and she still wants to be around me, so that I think that is a very much a plus.
I wasn't going to go for the easy joke there. So thanks for picking up your own slack. I appreciate that.
I've done some sort of deep maintenance projects that I would never have time to do, and some things that you just don't do, period. We have two walk-in draft beer coolers, and I took the evaporator apart and cleaned the fans, and it was all this funk that kind of is inside the box that the evaporator is
Well,
contained in.
and Michael, didn't I see a picture of you polishing your fan blades the other day
You
on
did,
Facebook?
you did, and I had like a before and after, and one of the fan blades was covered with all this funk, and the other one all like shiny, like it just came out of the factory. And I went into that draft cooler and sanitized the entire thing, and in the corners you get a little bit of white mold from the beer yeast. There is nothing in there now. I mean, I spent a couple days like doing something that you just would never. How would you ever have time to do that? I mean,
And that's just it. We ripped out our entire system and replaced it, like lines, everything, and scrubbed. And then we ripped out a lot of the bar. And I had time, so I actually took our antique bar rail, which is probably late 1800s, original to the building, and I don't think has been polished in just about that long, and had it professionally polished, and people think it's new. That I just
those pictures, Polly, were spectacular.
Yeah, they really were.
Yeah, I saw those. It's amazing.
But when would you have the opportunity? You're right. When would you have the opportunity to do that? I mean, I think to some extent we're blessed that we had enough money to pay for the work, or to do it ourselves, or to pay for the equipment. But yeah, so that's a small lining, and more time with my family.
For all of this though, I'm curious, is it that you do have more time? And because I'm thinking about brain space, right? There's so much stress that everybody's carrying right now, and that has right now. Is it the brain space to sort of say, okay, well, what can I do with this downtime? Or is it also a combination of just fewer people in the bar, and you get to look at things that might otherwise have been obscured?
Oh, well, for me, I mean, I definitely, I've always seen those things. It's just I've never had the time to be able to do a lot of those kind of things. That's been a big part of it. Plus, I find it very cathartic to rip things apart and get very detailed and get right into that nitty gritty of it, and kind of tune out the other stuff for a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think the whole brain space thing, it's funny because I get these emails from people. Do you want to do delivery service? Do you want to do this, do that to build your business? And I find my mind sometimes just shuts down on those issues. And I also find the list that my distributors send me of what's available, I sometimes I can't look at them. It's too painful.
In what way?
Because I can't order it. I don't have enough customers, even with our limited opening hours, to go through the amount of beer that I would normally go through. So I can't order, obviously, the way that I used to. I mean, we used to flow through, 35, 40 taps, and we never kept anything on over a week and a half, 2 weeks. As far as one keg goes for freshness, I'm down to between 5 and 7 or 8. And sometimes I'm stressed that I might not sell those within what I consider a good freshness window. So when I get these emails with this, fabulous offering, or this new saison, or I'm sort of yearning for an English bitter because I'm in London right now and all the pubs are closed. So I can't go to a pub here.
That's actually very cruel. That's like the end of that Twilight Zone episode where the man is left alone with all of his books and his glasses break. You're so close to
right.
It's exactly like that. No, that's the perfect thing. Because before I came, do y'all know Jaime Urado?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Jaime sent me this fabulous list of his friends in the brewing community here, and he was going to set Naomi and I up with, this pub and that pub, and then of course everything's shut down, and they don't even allow curbside here. I mean, a stay-at-home order is truly you stay. The only place you can go is to the grocery or the pharmacy. There's no curbside shopping. There's nothing, and so of course we can't do any of that. So we're in a hotel, and we just checked in this afternoon to a new hotel, and we're very lucky to get it. and I need to check their list to see if maybe they have a Timothy Taylor on the menu. That's the only thing I'm going to get.
It's almost something you should call about in advance.
Listen, I was lucky to get a hotel. They have
Yeah.
eight. They have 8 available rooms in this hotel. 8.
Oh, wow.
And it's the Dorchester, which is a very storied London hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And they currently have 4 rooms rented. You have to have a reason to be here. In our case, the reason was Naomi's flat was tiny and her radiator wasn't working. so
That makes sense.
Yeah,
yes.
I had pre-ordered 4 barrels of Firestone Walker DBA, and unfortunately, they arrived just before I closed.
Closed the first time or closed recently?
Second time. So we closed on November 7th. I managed to sell through one of them. And then, I felt bad because this is a time sensitive, low alcohol beer. And it was super, super fresh because they don't usually send it to the Chicago market. So they brought it in just for me. And, I felt really bad. I brought in this beer and it was wonderful. And then what am I going to do with it? We're completely closed. What I did again, which is what I did in March, is that I appealed on social media to my customers who have kegerators. And I sold 22 barrels of beer, mostly half barrels, and I sold them at $10 over cost. And
that was very clever. And I wish that I had done that early on with because we had to throw away a lot that didn't survive the wait. I wish I had thought of that. We did that with.
I was surprised at how many of my customers have kegerators that can accommodate half barrels, and
Right.
I sold some pretty expensive stuff. And not all of it was time sensitive. I made sure that I got rid of the Pilsners and lagers and IPAs, but I also sold a 13.5 barrel of St. Bernardus App 12 to somebody to drink at home. That's a lot of really strong beer to drink at home. But
I know early on people were really sort of compensating and going into their cellars. I that is a lot for a single household.
Yes, well, and the thing, the reason that I didn't really try to make any money on it is the most important thing was just to move this stuff out and make the customers happy. The $10 a keg I charged was so I had an employee come in and he dragged the stuff out of the basement up the stairs. So he got $10 a barrel to bring them up the stairs because I wasn't going to do that.
Michael, am I remembering correctly that in the early days of the COVID sort of impacting life, that you were also selling draft beer at pretty low prices as well, and people were coming in with all sorts of different containers to fill up off of your taps?
Yeah, we were a lot less prepared in March. I had 88 full kegs of beer in my cooler and 66 tapped kegs. And we did a growler sale, and we made some money on it, but it was mostly about getting the beer out, at least making our money back, and providing a few of our staffers an opportunity to make some money. The people who came and bought the growlers tipped extraordinarily generously, and our staff that worked those events did very, very well, which probably helped them out for weeks and weeks to come. So all that beer that we had in March, we sold it all. And we also sold on a pre-order, prepay basis. So they just had to come and pick it up. We sold 4,000 bottles of beer from our bottled, stash. And, in March and April, that really helped us out. This time around, I didn't have nearly as much. I was very cautious about buying, and I really didn't have much in the way of bottled product. I'm not worried about it. And I had a lot less draft that I was worrying about because we were very cautious, and the breweries had less draft beer to sell us. They're terrified to put anything in a keg right now.
Yeah. Chris, 2 days before we recorded this, and this will go up about a week later, you're doing something similar now with Falling Rock Tap House, and you're opening up your cellar and your book and trying to get some bottles into the hands of people to keep the coffers a little bit full. Can you sort of like walk through what that process in your own mind was like to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, we've been thinking about it. I mean, after reading, seeing Michael's posts about it earlier in the spring, my assistant Beth and I have been kind of getting things ready for it because, I mean, it's a lot of different bottles and it's a lot of crawling down into the, sub-basement, and which is only about maybe 5'6" tall. So some people might not have a hard time down there, but me at 6'2", it is kind of an awkward position to be in. But we started getting this stuff ready, and we started to really accelerate it in November when we went from, being able to do 25% indoor service. And, Denver in October can be kind of sketchy on the weather, but we had a really beautiful October. And so all of our doors were open and we'd had the air going, and we started to really think about, hey, we really need to access this money that we've stuck away years and years and years ago, some of it up to 23 years ago. And we started trying to figure out how to incorporate that on our website so that it could be a pre-order, prepay, so people just have to swing by and get it. So we worked with our website company, and they put in the little plugins, and then we had to enter all that information into it. So we've been doing that solid for 3 weeks now. And so yesterday at 7:00 in the evening, I told people about it. Now we had, the inventory was already live, and some of our regulars had noticed it. So they had already ordered, about $1,400 worth of beer over the previous week, just kind of as they were looking at our food offerings every weekend. And so I put out the post last night, and within 3 hours had somewhere around 5,000 views, and we had about 40 orders. As of this morning, we have 79 orders. Yay. And for a reasonable chunk of change. Yeah, I mean, my wife was, she saw some of the things that were going out, like all the Thomas Hardys, and she dearly loves those. And I go, yeah, pretty much all the Thomas Hardys are gone now, because I had them going back to 94. Wow. And the prices on them were actually, they were pretty much what I had marked things down to. Couple of years ago, I had cut my margins on a lot of my bottled product because it just wasn't moving. I mean, for years and years, I could put 20 or 30 cases down there, and 20 or 30 cases would come out of the cellar every year. But about 5-6 years ago, man, that just came to a screeching halt.
Me too.
That's interesting that you say that, because I thought that was just our experience, but it clearly wasn't, because that's what happened to us as well.
I'd say about 2 years ago, 35% of my sales were bottled beer, and we carried over 400 different beers in bottles. And I've been cutting back and kind of culling the herd for a while because the sales haven't been great. But when we closed in March, we had about 260 brands still in our stock. And I think that, when this all ends, I'm never going to carry that many beers in bottles again.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Neither will I.
I'm going to go.
Neither will I.
I have gone through my list and figured out about 110 beers that I want to carry in bottles. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I had very similar numbers.
yeah. We had similar numbers as well, and I haven't been collecting as long as you two have, but to so in September of last year, I placed a giant order for Driefonteinen, and it was some very special beers that had not been into the United States before, and it was supposed to come in, and we were supposed to have the equivalent of Swansea Day sometime in the spring. It was supposed to come in right after Mardi Gras. So the beer arrived, I want to say, in the States in April, but because of the pandemic, it couldn't be shipped. But we got it during the full shutdown, during the stay-at-home, and it was $10,000 worth of Driefonteinen.
Oh, jeez.
I think everybody who's on this call and everybody who's listening, their heart just stopped for a half a second there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was $10,000, and of course, when we're blowing and going, that's not a big deal. But when we're literally shut down and we don't know when we're going to be allowed to reopen, and the distributor calls me, says your Driefonteinen is here, and I said, what's the total? Because I knew it was going to be around that, and he said that, and he said, when can we deliver it? And I said, tomorrow. And so that is, curiously enough, my idle loan had just come through, and I took $10,000 out of my idle to write a check for that.
I'm not quite sure what idle is. I'm sorry.
Economic injury disaster loan.
Oh, okay. Sorry. EIDL. I'm sorry.
Right. EIDL.
I was thinking like American singing competitions. I apologize.
No, I would not win any competitions.
I mean, I also got in on some of that Driefonteinen, and however, I will say that I'm not worried about that. I didn't make a push to sell any of that product. So the special, like lambics, I'm not worried about. They keep forever. I know I'll sell them.
Oh, me too. It's just writing a check for that in the middle.
Very hard to write a check for it when you're closed.
Yes. So what we ended up doing, interestingly enough, with it was, obviously Swansea Day is something we normally do. That didn't happen. I sold through my Swansea stash with Jean's approval to pay our health insurance for our staff in August, including some very special bottles of Soleil de Menu.
That's John from Cantillon. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm just here now to provide context. It's clear that you all don't need me here for this conversation, which is amazing. So I'm just going to jump in with context now and again, just for the listeners, and then I'm going to back out.
So when we had this Driefonteinen, and of course it's sitting in my cellar, and I'm collecting interest on the loan that I bought, that I used to pay it. And what we were able to do, because we were able to reopen, we changed our licensing from a bar to a restaurant, which allowed us to open a little bit in advance of other places. And since we're conducting everything like a restaurant now, for safety purposes, it works. So we're doing we limit the tastings to 12 people. It's 12 people on the entire second floor of the bar. They're so spaced out. Yes. That's it, and we won't do more than 12.
Everybody gets 6 feet plus, because I've been up there. That's yeah.
And they prepay, which is something that we weren't used to doing either. And we run through a flight with food pairings with it. And I think that Michael and Chris probably have the same feelings. We're so fortunate to have the customer base that we do. People who truly love the product that we work so hard to serve, and truly appreciate what we do. So when I put that online, we've done 2 so far, and we still haven't paid for the product yet. We're not, I'm going to do a happy dance when we get to 10 grand, because I'll know the beer is paid for. God,
I know that feeling.
Oh, absolutely. But it gave us, you talked about the mental energy to do stuff. When we first started planning this tasting, I almost didn't have the mental energy to do it, because it's just such a slog to get through the day. And, but when we did that, and we had the 12 people come in, and they're all socially distanced, and they had just a marvelous time. I have to tell you that it was so heartening and made me feel so appreciative of the chance that we had to buy the beer, but then also the customer base that appreciates it.
I want to talk about customers for a minute and the customer base, because I asked you three on the show because you do have very distinct bars, and you have been leading the charge for serving better beer in your own respective areas for quite some time, and have been great advocates of the beer industry. And I'm curious, Michael and Chris, when you've now put some of your inventory online and sold it out there, are these your regular customers with the kegerators that are buying stuff? Are there new people who have discovered you? Are these beer collectors or people who you think are trying to flip it? Or are they just like altruistic people who really just want to see you succeed in the long term, or a blend of all of that? I know that's sort of a convoluted question, but
Most of my people were definitely regulars, and I doubt that anybody flipped any of the beer that they bought from us, no matter how rare it was.
okay.
I think that people, I'll bet almost all of those bottles that I've sold when I did the bottle sale, I'll bet there aren't any of them left now. They've all been drunk. And, because, and the kegs, we get the empties back. We charge a deposit on them. And so, I have had a chance to be in contact with all those people again when they brought the empties back and got their deposit. And, I always ask them, how'd you like it and everything? They say, oh my God, I loved it. We had a great, it was a great experience having this beer that we would never have on draft in our homes. But almost all of them said, but we can't wait to come back to Hopleaf and drink these beers here.
Yeah.
One of a real example of how generous and loyal our customers have been is that we have sold several gift cards, Hopleaf gift cards, for $1,000. Now,
Okay.
somebody's they're investing $1,000 into a place that, at this point, there's no guarantee that we'll be there for them to, to use that. I mean,
There's a very good chance they never intend to use it.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've
Oh,
had
yeah.
people do that, and I have one customer who finally figured out. I think I gave him my Venmo because I was doing some. We did a lot of charity work for New Orleans EMS, and I was collecting money to help pay for those charity meals. And I gave him my Venmo because he wanted to donate to that cause, and he regularly Venmos me money, and he's in DC. And I'm like, Tony, you gotta stop. You gotta stop this. Really. And of course, I end up tipping out the staff with it. And then he managed to get the Venmo of some of my staff members, and he just sends the money. And so I told him to stop. And it's funny because just a couple of nights ago,
Found a workaround. Yeah.
Right. He saw something on my Facebook page that I was trying to coordinate for New Orleans EMS. And he says, I want to donate to that. I'm going to send you the Venmo. And I said, no. You need to send it to the foundation. Here's their address. But to Michael's point, I mean, these are people who I think feel an emotional attachment to what we do and to the people behind the bar, so to speak, and really want to see us survive.
Chris, what about you? What are you seeing at this point?
I mean, I've had, oh God, I can't even tell you how much. Yeah, probably about $5,000 worth of gift cards bought. And I had one customer who's been coming here forever who bought like, I don't know, probably $200-300 worth of gift certificates, and showed up to pick them up. And he took the gift certificates from me and then walked over to the trash can and ripped them up and threw them in the trash can.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And
we had a customer in San Diego. He comes into Chicago once a month on business, and he always comes to Hopleaf. But he lives in San Diego, and when we had our first keg sale, he bought a barrel of Poppering's Hamel beer. And I said, well, you're in San Diego. How am I going to get this keg to San Diego? He goes, don't just sell it again.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, our big week is Great American Beer Festival. And, I mean, it's, 10% of our annual sales in 6 days. And, everybody comes here. And, I just, the thought of not having something was just really, really, weighing on, our staff and everybody.
From like a happiness standpoint, right?
Just a sense of being, and so I started thinking about it. My assistant and I started thinking about it. She kind of came up with the basic idea of, what if we did a seated beer festival where, you could have your own table, whether it be for 1 or 2 or 4 people, whatever your pod is. And what if we brought the beers to them and we curated the beer festival to them?
Oh my God, Chris, tell me that it was 1 ounce pours in plastic glasses.
It was still plastic glasses, but it was 2 ounces pours because I wanted to be twice as good as the beer festival. And
so many farts, so many pretzel necklaces.
Oh God. But the biggest problem was, as we were moving in towards September and we didn't know what the rules were going to be about, it just, 2 or 3 weeks in advance. And so we had to kind of keep things under wraps. I talked with quite a few breweries. We lined up what beers we were going to do. I pulled out a lot of stuff from my keg cellar where there's far too much beer in there. And so we decided we would have 30 2-ounce pours, and it would be done as 6 flights of 5 beers. And, we had a nice little placemat with the little circles and the numbers on it so everybody could keep everything straight. And we would do it that way. And, but, then it becomes the logistics of how do I then get those beers all in the correct order where everybody knows which beer it is because they're all going to look alike. And so I had to make a bunch of sample paddles because I don't really have any money. So I made 220 sample paddles out of $90 a sheet plywood.
Wow.
And I think between Beth and myself, we spent about 100 hours on it.
That's
but
impressive.
They're spectacular.
That's so cool.
And I spent probably 5 minutes explaining how this would work to my staff. And they were like, it was like 100% buy-in in 5 minutes. And they were so pumped up about it. On the Friday, we did 4 sessions so that between 2 sessions, we could get rid of a 5-gallon keg of beer, like come pretty close to it if we sold out the event. And on our Friday session, we had 92 people, I think it was, spread out between outside, inside, and downstairs. So, and the feedback from the customers was unbelievable because all these people, we actually had people fly in for it. I mean,
wow.
They had already bought their tickets to come to GABF anyway, and they couldn't get their money back. So they decided, hey, let's come, let's do this thing. They had a level of trust that we would be doing things according to all the regulations. And we were very adamant with people about, having their masks on and staying seated. And we had, we brought in porta potties so that people outside used the outside porta potties and the people upstairs used the upstairs restroom, all that kind of stuff. And the feedback we got from the customers about, how they felt being where they were, and how it went and how the staff behaved and how the other customers behaved, because everybody, even though a lot of these people have known each other for 20 plus years, it's like you can't go talk to the other tables. You can say hello from where you are, but you can't go over to the other tables. And people were very good about that and took it very seriously. And it, financially it was nice. It brought in a little bit of extra cash. But just that feeling of actually doing a thing that approximates some normalcy right now was a huge plus.
We're in the hospitality business, and it's really hard, for us to not be hospitable, to not be serving people. I've been serving people for over 45 years, and this is the longest period where, it's driving me nuts to not serve people, to not meet new people, to not introduce people to new things that will make them happy. And, if you, like Chris, trying to think of an event that can at least allow you some semblance of that, it's very therapeutic for us.
Early on, and then Chris, you just sort of mentioned it as well, of this following the rules as well. And you all have built your bar reputations off of, being good stewards of the community, not just in beer, but also in business and members of your own neighborhood, as it were. And we've seen terrible examples that pop up on the internet of bars that have been flouting the rules. And then, Chris, I saw a post from you a couple of weeks ago where a customer went to one of your bartenders and complained about the guy working the door who was pretty strict with the mask mandate. And it turns out that it was you working the door at the time, which, I found pretty funny, but it also just sort of shows, how difficult it is to be a business owner, a bar owner, wanting to survive, but then also sort of following these rules that are changing on a daily basis and being amenable to them all along.
Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few Yelp reviews complaining about the doorman, that I was kind of surly and rude to their wives. And
I mean, I left that review back in 2016, but yeah.
I mean, and of course it's me, because I've been the doorman for this entire time. So I am the lifeguard, basically, sitting there watching everybody, reminding people to put their mask on before you stand up and before you start walking across the floor to the bathroom. And we've actually, the interesting part is, we have the health department and have been doing inspections all over town and everything like that. And so far, they actually haven't entered my place, because they've walked up to the front, and while they were waiting for me to take care of a customer, take him in, they've heard me give the speech that I have given, 10,000 times, over the past few months.
What's the speech?
Oh, I'm not going to go through it. It's just so I haven't had to do it in 3 weeks, so I've tried to block it out of my mind. But basically, just telling people, hey, this is how you have to do things. You have to wear your mask, and where the bathroom is, and how to get to it, all this kind of stuff. And the health department people, I see them with their clipboards, just sitting there checking boxes, looking at me, giving me a big thumbs up, and walking off. Because I tell the people every single time, and then when they don't do it, I'm like, we told you this at the beginning.
Polly, in your city though, where the whole motto is "Let the good times roll."
Yeah.
How hard is it to abide by this?
Well, so first of all, I'm a rule follower, which is kind of funny, being a bar owner and being a rule follower. But so I follow the rules, but I think what you're hearing out of Chris and Michael, as well as I, is that we in many cases go beyond what we're required. We do what we think is safe. And I would say it's funny listening to Michael talk and Chris talk too. one of the sort of painful things about COVID is dreading certain customers that you used to love, knowing that they're going to come in the door and not be able to behave themselves, and you're going to be in the position where you have to fuss at them to get them to put their mask back on, and that has been one of the more painful things. Not the random person, because we still get tourists that truly have no clue what's going on. And very early on, we stopped giving out masks. I mean, I think I gave out masks for the first week, and after that I didn't, because
it's expensive.
No, that's not why. I didn't, because if you were so clueless that you were walking into a place without your own mask, then you were exactly the kind of person that's not going to follow the rules once you're inside.
Love it.
And I didn't.
Yeah. Amen.
And I didn't want my staff to have to fight that. So if now, it's one thing if somebody, I mean, we actually do have masks. If somebody's breaks, we give them one, but a lot of bars were handing them out early on. And we found that the customer that doesn't walk in with one is the customer that is not gonna. It's funny because there's some people that will do exactly what they need to do to get to the table. And then once they get to the table, it's all gone. And of course you're in this situation where you feel like you have to ask somebody to leave. Thankfully, those incidents are becoming less and less and less. So many more people are with the program now. More people are with the program now than they used to be, that we're not having that issue the way we used to. And we've also, I don't know if you know this, John, but I think Chris and Michael know, we invested a massive amount of money redoing our HVAC system to a filtering process that helps kill all the bacteria. So we've spent an enormous amount of money to keep our staff safe and our customer base safe. And we want customers that appreciate that. And for the most part, they do.
I have to say, we had so few incidents of people not cooperating. It's almost not even worth mentioning them. And the ones that we had trouble with were not our regulars. And who they tended to be was people from other counties or municipalities, or from across the border in Indiana or across the border in Wisconsin, who are living in a place where there are no rules.
Right.
And, this is the problem we have across the country, is that the virus doesn't respect borders, but we in Chicago are very close to Indiana and very close to Wisconsin, who have much less regulations. And then even within the state of Illinois, there are counties and municipalities who are allowing bars and restaurants to be open as if COVID-19 doesn't exist. And
now, Michael, the government, I mean, Chicago has completely shut down all indoor dining now where you are.
Illinois there's no indoor dining in Illinois right now.
Oh, that's the entire state. That's not just Chicago.
State, except that, in less than an hour, I can be in Indiana or Wisconsin, and the rules are completely different there.
Are you seeing that people are getting in their car, going out for a Friday night meal by leaving the state borders and then coming back?
Absolutely.
That's a nightmare.
And that's why, because we never had one message for the entire nation, we never made it, we never tried to make being careful a patriotic thing. Instead, we used it as COVID-19 as a way to further divide us. Yeah. And, so people come in, the few people that we had trouble with would say, well, I just drove in from Oak Brook, or I just drove in from, Hammond, Indiana, and we can do, all the bars are open there. Why aren't yours? Or I can sit at a bar stool next to somebody there, but I can't do it here. And, I said, absolutely, you can't do it here. People within our community, within our neighborhood, and within Chicago, people are overwhelmingly obeying the suggestions of health professionals. But unfortunately, not that far away, there is some place where people can walk into a bar and sit at a bar stool in a crowded room where hardly anybody's wearing masks. And some people find that, that should be the way it is.
I want to thank you for reminding me
Yeah.
that Hammond, Indiana exists. I covered a serial killer there in my young reporting days at the Indy Star. So thanks for bringing back that flood of memories. I'm curious though, and I want to, if we have time, I want to sort of get down into, patriotism and going forward. But I'm curious and Michael, I know your doors are closed right now, but I haven't been in a bar since March, and I haven't, been to any of the places that I want to go because I'm trying to be safe, and we're trying to support local as best we can in our household. What is it like inside of your bars these days? Because it's not business as usual. You have all created these wonderful ecosystems that are very much driven by your personality, driven by your ethos, driven by the areas that you're in, all under the umbrella of great beer. What is it like in December or November before your shutdown, Michael, versus what it was like in this time last year?
Early on in March when we were closed, I took some photographs of the inside of our place at night with nobody in there, and I put it on our website and put it on social media. And it's like, God, this place is so beautiful, and it's so sad I'm there every day. I spend 6 to 8 hours at Hopleaf every single day, even though we're closed. If I have to be working on my computer, if I have to, I got to do some cleanup projects, and just to keep an eye on the physical plant, I need to be there.
Yeah.
And it's so quiet. It's so, there's no laughing people. There's no sounds of, clinking glasses and laughing. And, it's all those things. It's actually otherworldly, how different it is. And, I built this great environment for people to have a good time in, and there's no people, and it's bizarre. And I started working in bars in 1972, and so this is a very big change for me personally, and it goes beyond the fact that people aren't coming to my bar. I'm a bar customer. I like going to other people's bars too. I like going out to eat. I like going to see live music. I'm not doing any of that stuff myself either. It's killing me on both ends. I can't be a customer and I can't be a server.
Chris or Polly?
Yeah.
I would say that's
is. Yeah. Go ahead.
Chris. Well, no, go ahead, Chris.
No. Go ahead, Polly. Go.
Everybody is so polite here. Polly and then Chris.
I would say that it's very similar for us. A big part of our clientele base prior to the pandemic was service industry. We were kind of the bar, one of the many bars, but specifically a big bar for restaurants and bartenders in other parts of the city, hospitality to come and gather in, because at the time we were open 24 hours. And so they got off, they got out of the kitchen at 11:30 or 12, they could come in and have a few drinks before they went out, before they went home. And then we were customers of those bars. I mean, as you all know, bar employees tend to be really good fine dining customers as well. I mean, we really enjoyed what our city had to offer. We have an 11 o'clock curfew in New Orleans for alcohol sales now. So that means that 11 o'clock, nobody can sell alcohol. So even the people who are working, that we would normally get after work, they can't come in. They can't go anywhere else either. They just have to go home.
Oh,
Because at 11 o'clock, everybody has to close. Now you talk about bizarre for New Orleans. The idea that everybody would cease selling alcohol.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
No, even the idea of a last call for me was very, very strange. That just didn't exist. And the only reason, it's funny, and I think I've told this story a number of times. When we went to Europe a couple of years ago, when we took our staff to Europe, we had to have locks installed on the doors because we were 24 hours. We never closed. We didn't need locks. So this time around, when the shutdown came, Eileen and I, my GM, look at each other and go, "Oh my God, where are the keys to the locks?" And the last time we used them was when we all went to Sweden. And we couldn't find them. We had to have the locks rekeyed in order to shut down. Right. I mean, we have hurricane shutters that we normally close for hurricanes, and that's easy. But we didn't actually have, we couldn't find the keys to the door because it had been 2 or 3 years since we'd had to lock anything.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Chris, what's it like inside of your place these days?
It's pretty quiet. During the initial shutdown in March, we boarded up the windows, and that was massively depressing because you'd be inside and you couldn't see the daylight. And so when we were allowed to reopen in June, we took down the boards, and that was a good feeling. But, in the middle of summer, we started having some problems with some other bad actors in the neighborhood, and some of those people have made it very much on the internet. And one of them's notorious is like the worst episode of Bar Rescue because he got into a fist fight with the host. And there were like lines of hundreds of people outside of this pool hall with hundreds of people inside when you were allowed a maximum of 50.
Oh my God.
And so the state, it was worse than anything you could ever think of. It was horrible. And so the state came in and slapped an 11 o'clock curfew, which at first I was very supportive of, and like, hey, this will calm down some of the stuff. We were already closing at 11 because I didn't want our staff or myself to be around it because the people just were not, they were acting as if nothing was going on. And it was primarily a younger crowd, but I was seeing plenty of people in that same age cohort coming through my bar. But they were all coming in earlier on, and you didn't have to tell them to put the mask on, and you didn't have to tell them what they were supposed to do. They got it. They understood it. It wasn't just younger people. It was a subset of younger people that were causing problems. And when we shut down the bars early, all we did was we told them not to go out to bars, to some sort of controlled environment. We told them to go to each other's houses. And it's just been, and the same things happened all over the country. And it's been really tough. But inside my bar, primarily it's so quiet. I mean, I hear the tiniest sounds all over the place. So I tend to kind of crank up the music in my place. I have an incredible sound system in here that's got something like, like 6,500 watts of sound for my place, which is only about 5,500 square feet, with some really good speakers and really good equipment. So I tend to play, I'm the only one in here, so I'm just blasting music like crazy. Because it's either that or I have to listen to every tiny click and sound in the whole building, and it's depressing.
There are two things that I want to get to all of you with. The first is obviously ways that people can not only support your bars, but I think independently owned restaurants and bars as well. And that's ordering directly from you, going directly to your website, not necessarily using a third party, or actually picking up the phone and calling and placing orders. Polly, you mentioned early on all these emails that you're getting from vendors who are trying to, help you stay in business and help you make money. But it really just does come down to a customer proprietor relationship at this point, right? To put the most amount of money in your all's pockets to help you stay afloat.
Yeah, I would say one of the nicest things that a customer can do that comes in and wants to know what would help the most, I tell them order something off my seller list, because that's something that I paid for a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So, and it's not something that I have to immediately go out and replace. So when you order the IPA, and I go through a case of IPA, I have to reorder that IPA the next week. And this is not something that we've talked about, but I do hope that I did want to mention, I'm very worried about the sort of classic legend Belgian beers, and European beers, and I'm concerned that they're going to completely disappear in the United States as a result.
I mean, is this part of Shelton Brothers as well, and they're being dissolved earlier this year?
Certainly part of that, but I don't mean just that. I mean Orval, I mean Rochefort, I mean
Sure.
a lot of them. I'm very concerned that, and one of the things that I
what is that born from? Your concern?
Well, I think first of all, the hazy IPA craze and the pastry stout craze.
Oh, it's not even a craze like that. That's a pretty.
Yeah, and the whole hard seltzer, it was already sort of difficult to sell those beers, and getting people to order those classic beers on the menu, you have to physically push them. And I'm worried that without retailers like Michael and me and Chris, sort of doing that on a regular basis, that the imports will just plummet and that we won't have access to those in the future. That's just an aside. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent, but it does worry me.
No, that makes sense. Michael, what about you though? In the way that, I know the ease of the internet has made it, Grubhub and some of these other apps easy for people to use, but it also, while it fuels their company, takes a couple of bucks out of, all of yours. Is there something that consumers can do?
Well, right now, I mean, now we are hibernating. We've turned our coolers off. We have basically mothballed hop leaf. I mean, we're not
Nice.
In order to survive the winter, I suspended my liquor liability insurance, my general liability insurance, my workman's comp insurance, all of my leased equipment. I'm closed. Like there's not much. Yes, we can sell gift certificates. I can sell my Hop Leaf branded glassware, and we're doing a little bit of that.
Oh, everybody should have Hop Leaf branded glassware.
Yes. So, basically what I'm telling people who really want to help us now, who maybe already have 5 gift certificates, is I want to see them in April. I want them, don't forget about us.
Yeah.
I need them to support us when we reopen like they never have before, because we're so far behind on everything. There's going to be a lot of bars and restaurants that are going to go out of business in like next August or next September because they couldn't catch up from, they had to borrow money to stay viable. And then all these debts come due. So I want people to realize that when we do reopen, things won't be exactly the same. And maybe we won't have as much a depth of product, but bear with us and understand. I do want to add to what Polly says, that I am also concerned about these import beers going away. This was already happening. A lot of them, because of the locavore movement, you know, half of my customers don't drink anything that's brewed more than 50 miles away from where they live anymore. And that makes it really hard to sell, Pop Rings Hammelbier and Saison DuPont and Rochefort. And we really don't want those beers to go away. So, we're going to have to work twice as hard to keep them coming when the pandemic is over. Fortunately, some of these breweries are still selling their beer in retail stores, but it's never going to be the same as it was selling them, in our pubs.
Well, I mean, from a drinker's perspective, it's just a different experience. There's something nice about going to a bar and ordering something, like those beers that you've mentioned, both of you, and having them in a shared experience with people as opposed to sitting at my basement bar and doing it by myself. Chris, what about you though? How can people best help?
Like Polly said, our vintage list is up on there, and that's a bank account that we, loaded up years ago, and it's not product that I have to replace immediately. Coming on a regular basis, we've been doing. One of our bartenders is a phenomenal cook and makes seriously the best barbecue in the state of Colorado, which admittedly is not the highest hurdle. I'm coming from Texas originally.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like two places in the state that I consider to be acceptable. And then my bartender, Foosh, and he's been making barbecue for our anniversary party for, 15 years. So he's been coming up with specials for Saturdays, and that's been nice because it allows him to earn some money, and it gives an excuse for people to come here. And most of it is they're coming by to pick up and leave because we're only allowed outdoor dining right now. And Denver in December, is not really patio season so much most of the time. At least I'm not in Chicago, so I've got that going for me. But we've had some nice 60-degree days, so we've had a few people sit on the patio, but people are coming by, and they're also ordering some crowlers of beer to go, so I can keep turning over some beers. I still have way too many beers on draft, and next week there's about a whole bunch going to go away because they're just timed out, and we've been working really hard on keeping our lists as small as we can. I worry too about, the drinking habits of people. I mean, things of, the locavore movement, and the worst thing, has been the ticking culture. I mean, I had one, gentleman who writes about beer, who's a little bit older than I am, say, hey, Chris, sampling has always been a part of the industry. And I said, yes, but it's changed. Because it used to be you were trying all these beers because you were looking for, beers that if you saw them again on tap or in a bottle, that was something that you knew that you liked and you could have again. And unfortunately, the culture has completely switched to once you've had it and you've checked it off on your little list,
you don't want it anymore.
You don't. You're never going to have that again. And that completely screws up the ecosystem of the craft beer and the craft beer movement, and it has just been so detrimental. And fortunately, we have our regulars that we're all in their 30s and 40s and 50s when we opened up 23 years ago, and of course now that makes them in a much more vulnerable population, so they tend not to go out as much right now, especially during COVID. And so that's one negative for us. But those people are ordering those beers and coming by and taking them to go. And that's been, really heartening. And, the other thing about the locavore movement is, I'm sure you have, Michael and Polly both have bars in their area that, we only sell things, from the state you're in, the city you're in, whatever your region and everything like that. And, I've always kind of thought that having that exposure to the entire world of beer as being a huge positive, and it also keeps the brewers in your area more up to date and more understanding, kind of how the whole thing's working and what other people are doing in other places. I mean, imagine if we didn't have those classic English ales or those Belgian beers or things like that, or those German lagers, 40 years ago when we were all just embarking on this kind of, exploration, what would we have to base our things off so that we could take them further like we as Americans tend to do? And, I've always likened, just exclusively having things from only your own area kind of, sorry, it's a little indelicate, but, it's kind of a circle jerk. And it kind of,
leave it to the guy from Texas through Colorado. Yeah.
But,
No, but
I mean, really,
yeah, Chris is right, because especially with some of these Belgian styles, the chances that you're going to have a brewer in your state or much less city that can brew a saison as good as Blogy or Oberon, do they exist in the United States? Yes, but they're not in every city.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
You all have opened up about 90 different paths of conversation, of which I'm realizing our time is growing short together. Right now, the big question, I think, is stimulus for a lot of Americans and people who are worried about what the next couple of weeks bring. Often left out of these conversations is the hospitality industry at this point. Is there some sort of relief that can actually help, do you think? And if so, where should it be coming from? That's a jump ball.
That's a tough one. Yeah. I mean, the last thing I or probably anybody else needs is more debt service.
Right.
Basically our industry was effectively regulated out of business. And, I'm doing, right now, maybe 10% of my normal sales. And I've had to basically lay off my entire staff except for one. And it's tough. These are my, our FNG, that's the freaking new person, has been here for 3 years. So I still have 2 employees left that have been here since the day we opened. And I probably have 6 employees that have been here more than 20 years.
Wow.
And that's out of 9 or 10 employees. And these people are my family.
Yeah. And
plus I have to work with my family, and I try not to talk about that, but it's, I don't know. I hate to say, to walk around with my hand out on this stuff, because it's just not my nature, but I don't, what else can we do at this point?
Yeah, we can't borrow any more money.
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
We just can't. I could borrow more money tomorrow. I've still got the means to do that, but it would be crazy for me to do that. I would be, not guaranteeing, but it would be ensuring my lack of survival later on. So to me, the best thing would be I want to see the government help take care of the employees while they're at home. I think we're going to see a brain drain in the beer community, especially competent bartenders and beer servers, because I've lost probably 3 or 4 staff that I had to lay off. They've now completely left the industry because they're fortunate to have other skill sets where they can do that. But so we need to support workers. It still amazes me that we haven't done something to support businesses who are supporting their workers beyond the PPP. Some sort of tax credit or something for providing health insurance. it's something that would help a good employer take care of their good employees. And other than the PPP, that really is it. And of course, that was brief and didn't last long enough.
Yeah. Michael, any insight? Okay.
Yep.
I feel. Oh, hang on a second. Michael, is that you?
Yes, it is. My internet went dead.
Oh goodness. Here we were having a great conversation, and I threw a question to you, just sort of asking about, if in the stimulus world right now, and we're talking about some stimulus coming out to, everyday Americans and trying to keep things afloat. Is there anything that could help at this point?
Well, it's been mostly my full-time job these days, like trying to, besides like renegotiating our mortgage and renegotiating our construction loan and talking to all my, vendors and everything about, suspending or lowering my monthly payments. But I have, been applying for every single thing that the government has been, throwing our way. It's not enough. The number one thing that the government could do to help us really is to we need relief from our fixed costs. And if you're a renter, you need to be able to suspend your rent payments. And obviously the landlord can't not get money either. So maybe you offer, make every mortgage in the country and every business loan in the country, pretend that 2020 doesn't exist, and you take that 20-year mortgage and you make it a 21-year mortgage, and you just add a year with a gap year of payments, because that would be so helpful to all of us small businesses who can't pay our debt service.
Yeah.
I mean, we just can't when we're not taking in any money. And that way, by adding a year to every mortgage and every loan, the bank gets all their money. They just have to wait another year for it. And we get to stay in business, and they get to keep a customer. And this is something that the banks aren't going to do this on their own. The Fed has to tell them this is what you have to do.
Really quick to go around the table, because I'm mindful of everybody's time at this point. What does the future of the bar industry look like in America after a vaccine, after all of this? And let's start in the furthest away time zone and then work our way west. Polly, what does the future of America's bars look like?
I don't know. And I think that's part of what is so disturbing. And you talked about mental bandwidth earlier about not being able to figure that out. One thing I've always been very good at is trends, and saying, okay, this is what's going to happen, and this is the way the industry is moving. And do I like that? Do I want to do something different? How do I bring us forward in that environment? I don't know what the bar scene looks like. I am deeply concerned that it is not going to exist in the way that I think certain places will still exist. I think Michael, I think Chris, I think I will still exist, but I think we're going to lose the bar scene in general in the United States, because a lot of these people are just not going to be able, they're not going to have the staying power in the bank accounts to continue to operate, and we're going to lose staff as well. I think that trend was already on the march, in the sense that we have, the locavore and drink at the local breweries. So the bars that did a lot of business with draft beer, I think we're sort of fighting for business anyway. And that's going to continue. And I think it's going to be compounded by the fact that bars, it's going to be a while before we're a safe atmosphere in the way that we used to be.
Michael, what about you?
I agree that I don't really know either. I've been in the business, like I said, since the early 70s, and I always felt that that there were certain things that were certain about our business, and that's all up in the air now. We have no idea, and that's very frustrating. I also feel that habits have changed. We had customers that this was part of their daily life. They got off the train, and between the L stop and their house was Hopleaf. Well, What if they don't have to go into the office anymore? That's going to change their daily habits. We also, we've seen an absolute collapse of storefront retail, and people used to stop in for a beer and a sandwich after they went shopping, or the people who worked at the shoe store down the street, they would come in on their lunch break or after work. Well, when the shoe store closes, when all the stores are closing, habits are changing, and we were part of those habits. So I'm very, very concerned that we're not going to be part of people's daily habits anymore. And some of these trends were already, affecting us, but everything's been, speeded up. And so I have a feeling we'll still be around, but, and I'm not saying that every change is negative. There's going to be some positive changes that we will see because of this, but there's also going to be some very big negatives.
Chris?
Yeah, it's the habit thing is also just a huge. We saw a really great example of that a couple of years ago. We had a construction project in front of us for a year, actually 54 weeks, and it devastated our lunch business. And I'm not looking at, it took us 20 years to develop a decent lunch crowd, a fairly consistent one, and we got rid of it, half of it, within 3 months. And the other thing is that's changing is office utilization right now. Offices are looking at not coming back, with full staffs, maybe ever. Who knows? We don't know what that looks like in the future. We were surrounded by quite a few offices, and that brought us in, some lunch business and some happy hour business and things like that. And I don't know what that looks like next year. I was just talking with the largest office in our area. It's 2 doors down the street. They normally have about 250 people there on a daily basis, and right now there's 12.
Nice.
And they're not expecting. Right now, they're not expecting to have people coming into the office more than once a week, if that, until the end of April right now. And even after that, and for about a year afterwards, right now, their plan is that in the future, you'll only come in 1 day a week, and they'll kind of rotate through that. And that's mainly to pick up some of the mail and because they're a company that does public-private kind of company that does mortgages for middle and lower income people, and they're that's 50 to 100 lunches a week for us, and and there's no offices going to be in our neighborhood anymore, and it's a very different landscape, which is as a differentiating it from what's been going on in the last decade, which is in most places doubling the number of liquor licenses. I know that Michael's experienced that. I know we definitely have here. And, we've been very fortunate here in Colorado and especially Denver. We've been one of the fastest growing major markets in the United States for the last decade, but we've only added like 30% of people, and Chicago's actually lost people with that same thing happening. It's things are shifting around a lot, and then when you pull in the competition from the tap rooms that has, where the tap rooms have just become bars
Yeah, we
instead
didn't even
of
get into that. But
tasting
yeah,
rooms.
yeah.
Yeah. Hey, there's a lot of pressure on businesses like all of ours here. It's something I've been talking with a lot of some of the other people around the country about, and it's really challenging.
Chris, do you see a lot of, do you have business from like conventions and things like that, business travel?
Or the baseball stadium down the street, yeah.
Yeah, the baseball was a devastating loss for us. Not trying to say they should have had crowds in the baseball stadium, but that was a huge loss because that's 81 games and times people coming here on the way to the baseball game because we're half a block from home plate, and even on top of that, the people that work at the stadium, who work for the Rockies organization, who have to go eat lunch, every day. And we would get quite a few people from that. And, just that whole ecosystem was really challenged this year.
I think we're going to see, we definitely do a lot of business from, Chicago is a big convention city. And if there's 50,000 radiologists in town or 50,000 veterinarians at McCormick Place, even though we're not that close to them, we will see 100 of those people come in for a beer at Hop Leaf. And I don't think the convention business is ever coming back. Yeah. I just think that's gone.
Yeah.
It's a huge issue.
It's going to be challenging. Yeah, Polly, you are there in New Orleans. You have a huge convention center.
Yeah.
So we have 300, our population in Orleans Parish or City of New Orleans is 391,000 people. And our 2019 visitor count was 18 million. 18 million people visited New Orleans in 2019. There's no way that 391,000 people, as loyal as they may be and as well-intentioned as they may be, can replace 18 million. And I don't see a lot of that tourism coming back anytime soon.
No. I feel like we should end on a positive question, but in keeping with 2020, I think I'm going to leave it here, except to say that each of you, all of your places are national treasures. I've enjoyed spending my money there at all of your bars, and I look forward to doing it again. And on behalf of all of the drinkers who care about beer, thank you for everything. Thanks for all that you've done and the fight that you're continuing to wage. And I hope that 2021 is going to bring you some calm, some peace of mind, some good health and success again. Chris Black of the Falling Rock Tap House, Michael Roper of Hop Leaf in Chicago, and Polly Watts of the Avenue Pub in New Orleans. Thanks for being here, even though clearly you didn't need me for this conversation. I hope I can get you all three together again for another recording, and thanks for closing out the year on this show. That's Polly Watts of the Avenue Pub, Chris Black of the Falling Rock Tap House, and Michael Roper of Hop Leaf. My thanks to them for taking the time, and for all of you out there listening, I hope you'll remember to support your favorite local pub, no matter where it is. And a hearty thanks again for listening to this show. It's great fun to do this every week, and I have some fun plans for the show in the new year, and I hope you'll continue to tune in, engage on social media, and send your thoughts via email, and to let other beer enthusiasts know about what we're doing in this corner of the podcast universe. You can always reach me at John Holl, that's JOHNHOLL, at beeredge.com, or on Twitter at John_Holl. And please follow The Beer Edge on all of the social media channels at The Beer Edge. Andy Crouch is hosting the Beer Edge podcast, and you can find episodes of that at beeredge.com. Steal This Beer is on every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. You can find those where you get your podcasts. And on Facebook, you can find us talking about smoky lagers and ales on the This Week in Rausch Beer page. Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed the logo. I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again in the new year to drink beer and to think beer. Thanks for listening.